pressure. Love is patient. Love is kind. Love doesn't envy.
Love doesn't boast and isn't proud.
Love is not self-seeking. Love. Love is not angry. Love keeps no records of wrongs.
Love
Love doesn't delight in evil, but rejoices with the truth.
Love always protects.
Love always protects. Love always trusts. Love always hopes. Love always hopes. L-O-V-E. Love.
Love always perseveres.
Love never fails. Okay, can you stand right on this black piece of tape? Yeah. And can you hold this in when I say go? You say love, okay? Go. Love.
Good morning. It is so good to look out again and to see so many here this morning to worship God together. I'm thankful for your presence. I'm glad that you're here. Our Harvest Sunday opportunity to think about how the passing of time and the changing of the seasons and what we look forward to. It worked out so well for us to look at Psalm 126 in our series on these songs for climbing. Because the final verse of Psalm 126 tells us that he who goes out weeping, bearing the seed for sowing, shall come home with shouts of joy, bringing his sheaves with him. And bringing in the sheaves is a phrase for the harvest time. It's a phrase for what we are able to bring in after the crop has grown and what we expect to bring in. It usually happens around the fall time and things like that. Something for us to experience and to look forward to. I hope that as we spend the next few minutes looking at this psalm together, and really I have one major idea that I want to bring out of this psalm as I was studying through it this week and how it fits into our series. But I hope that you'll have your Bibles open, your eyes open, and your hearts opened together this morning as we enter into this time period. We remember that Psalm 126 is just another step in the road. And remember that it takes place in a journey that we are walking with pilgrims, that we're walking with those who are in search of a destination and of a home. I hope that we have been impressed with the way that these songs fit together, that we've been impressed with the attitude that they present to us, and that we've been impressed with how well they express what it's like to continue following God, continue going in the right direction through the days of our lives. There's another thought that I hope has been impressed upon us as we have looked through these things together this week. You know, just a week ago, Saturday, a 46-year-old man entered a synagogue in Pittsburgh and interrupted their service by opening fire and ultimately killing 11 people and wounding several more. This was just a week ago. Now, it happened pretty far away from us in relative terms. It happened at a synagogue. It wasn't what we might categorized as a church shooting. When the church shooting happened in Charleston, for instance, it got our attention. When the church shooting happened just a few miles north of here in Tennessee, it got our attention. But maybe the synagogue shooting last week hasn't been as much in the forefront of our minds. But when I was watching the news stories about this event and this tragedy and thinking about what people must be feeling who are up there going through that grief, it reminded me that these are the people whose songs we are singing when we open up the book of Psalms. When we dive into these hymns, these songs for climbing, that this is the language that they speak. This is the world that they live in. These are people who throughout the pages of history have suffered unimaginable pain around the world. We can look at times in Russian history. We can look at how Jews were treated in the Middle East, leading up to especially events like the Holocaust, just to name a few. This story is significant. Their history is significant because even though I'm not what they call a Zionist, someone who's looking for some fulfillment in the future of the Old Testament prophecies about the land of Israel, that's not what I'm getting at when I bring up these songs that we're singing today and how significant it is to look at this history. What I'm looking at is the resilience of people. What does it take to learn how to bounce back, to learn how to get through difficult times? If you followed the story in Pittsburgh, the name of that building where they gathered was called the Tree of Life Synagogue. It's a reference to the book of Genesis, the Tree of Life there. And a political cartoonist created this in memory of, or in honor of, the tragedy from last week. Because even though the synagogue is called the Tree of Life, that tree was cut down. It was the site of death and grief. And so we try to ask ourselves, how do you pick up? How do you move forward? How do you pick up the pieces in such times? Or as the book of Psalms says, that we look at in 126 this morning, how do we carry seeds for sowing and weep while we go? That's the question that I want to think about this morning. What is the heart of this song about? The idea of weeping as we work, the idea of rejoicing at the harvest. What I want to examine this morning and what I want to present to you as a part of this process, as one piece of the puzzle in continuing to go the right direction and following the path to where we're trying to get, as these pilgrims were doing, is that at the core of Psalm 126, there is a statement about the true nature of joy and how everyone who depends on God can be sustained by joy. See, our biggest problem today is that we have traded entertainment for joy. Distraction and diversion have been substituted for depth. But this isn't new. This isn't anything that just came about in our modern technological era. The Romans were famous for being sold on the idea that if you give the citizens bread and circuses, they will never revolt. It was the idea that, look, when they get restless, when the people start to get troublesome and they start to give us, as leaders, hassle, we'll give them food, make sure their bellies are full, and then we'll give them entertainment. We'll make sure that they have things like the Colosseums or the circuses, the places where they have chariot races. This is the great Colosseum in Rome, where they would stage gladiatorial events, where they would have people go and be entertained by different ways to pass the time. Cicero, who was a Roman philosopher at the time, he critiques this idea. He says this: the evil was not in bread and circuses per se, but in the willingness of the people to sell their rights as free men for full bellies and the excitement of the games, which would distract them from the other human hungers which bread and circuses can never appease. In other words, it was like the quote from the movie The Gladiator with Russell Crowe. There's that scene where he's fighting and he's finished the games, and he looks out of the crowd and he says, "Are you not entertained?" And that was the point of those episodes. And it was Roman practice to make sure that they built a Colosseum and built a circus, the Circus Maximus, in amphitheaters, that they built those all over the Roman Empire. They would find a city and they would build one of these Colosseums there so that they could send the people to be entertained by them. And unless we run the risk of thinking that that's just an ancient practice, that nobody else today would dare run the risk of being sucked into entertainment on such a grand scale that it distracts them from the normal, let's remember that we build cathedrals, we build colosseums today for much the same kind of reason. And we have to be aware that while, again, as Cicero said, there's nothing necessarily wrong with it in and of itself, when it's used as a distraction from causing us to be who we're supposed to be, when it calls us away from our true purpose, then we have made a mistake. You see, here's the problem. Eugene Peterson points out that the enormous entertainment industry that we live in today here in America is a sign of the depletion of joy in our culture. And then he had this phrase that I thought was very powerful. Society is a bored, gluttonous king employing a court jester to divert it after an overindulgent meal. That's the picture that struck me pretty hard. To think about the idea that, like the prodigal son, we can spend a fortune on riotous living, but at the end of the day, all we're left with is bankruptcy, financially and morally. There's something telling in our endless search for pleasure instead of peace. And Psalm 126 recognizes that there's something different. It's trying to redirect our attention and our focus. And that's what I want to think about for just a minute this morning. Why is it that in our search for joy, we so often take a left turn and take a shortcut to pleasure instead? That's what Psalm 126 is asking us about. Because there is this momentary enjoyment. There is this real sense of getting something that we want from following after whatever these things are, whether it's entertainment, whether it's distraction, whether it's drugs or alcohol, whether it's relationships, whatever these things are that, we recognize them to be temporary. We recognize them to be just momentary enjoyments. But why do they distract us so often? Why are we so pulled by them instead of doing the work that Psalm 126 talks about? Here's the biggest problem with these simple and shallow substitutes. They provide nothing permanent. They fixate on the here and now without helping us walk the long road. The question that we have to ask is, what happens when the lights go out? What happens when the music stops, when the love affair ends, when the fun isn't so fun, or when tragedy interrupts the festivities? None of these temporary things prepare or equip us for dealing with hardship, for dealing with struggle, for dealing with grief. And the real problem is, it's not just that they don't give us what we need. They actually handicap us. They actually weaken our ability to manage in difficult situations. And that's where Psalm 126 comes in. And it tells us to focus on or to turn to a different direction. It's a lot like the psalmist says in Psalm chapter 30 and verse 5, where it says, "Weeping may tarry for the night, but joy comes with the morning." I like that particular image because it reminds me of those days when I've had to get up long before sunrise and set out on a road trip. And I get in the car and I drive down the road, and especially when I'm headed east, for instance. When I go across the river and I get on Highway 72 or 157 and I start heading towards Moulton or Coleman, and if I'm on the road at the right time of day, if I'm heading in that easterly direction on the right time of day, it changes from a dark night And then eventually and gradually, and what I really think is so neat is that as the minutes pass and as the hours progress, that darkness slowly illuminates. And you see that first ray of sunshine creep over the hill. And then you see that first burst of the sun to come up over the horizon. And the day gets brighter and brighter and brighter. But to me, it's that first moment. The reason that when I'm on those trips, that what I look for is I look for that first faint glow of light on the horizon. And you know what I'm talking about. You've seen it before. The sky is still dark. You can still see the clouds, or can still see the stars and the moon, and the ground is still covered in shadow. You can't make out individual things, but there is this glimpse. There's this hint that the dawn is coming, that the morning is going to get brighter. And I think that's why the psalmist says that in Psalm 30 in verse 5. It says, the night is dark, yes, but if we hang on and if we hold on, then we will see the morning sun and joy will come again. In other words, here's how Eugene Peterson phrases it. One of the most interesting and remarkable things that Christians learn is that laughter does not exclude weeping. Christian joy is not an escape from sorrow. Pain and hardships still come, but they are unable to drive out the happiness of the redeemed. Here's the single point that I want to bring out this morning. When you look at Psalm 126, it really is divided into three parts. Really, it's divided into two parts with one phrase marking the middle in verse number 3. Verses 1, 2, and 3 is about the past. It's in the past tense. When the Lord restored the fortunes of Zion, we were like those who dream. It was a dream come true. God did something for us at some point, and it was a dream come true. How wonderful it was. Our mouth was filled with laughter, our tongue with shouts of joy. They said among the nations, the Lord has done great things for them. The Lord has done great things for us. See, that's all in the past tense. And then verses 4, 5, and 6 look to the future. Restore our fortunes, O Lord, like streams in the south. Those who sow in tears will reap with shouts of joy. He who goes out weeping, bearing the seeds for sowing, will come home with shouts of joy, bringing his sheaves with him. That's a look at the future. And what's the one phrase caught between the two? We are glad. This psalm, notice, this is the important part. This psalm does not say anything about current circumstances in the lives of the writer or the singer. We have no idea what's currently going on in the life of this person. But he says, look at what happened in the past, and look at what I expect or anticipate to happen in the future. And so based on those two things, right now, I'm glad. Now that's significant. In my mind, as I imagine what's going on, I imagine things are not going very well right now for this author. I imagine that we're right in the middle of what verses 5 and 6 talk about, the planting season, the going out, the leaving, the hard work of tearing up the land and of planting the seeds, the labor, the work, the toil. It's not pleasant. There's something unhappy that's happening. There's hard work that's going on. And so in this particular moment in time, it feels like things are not good. And yet somehow Psalm 126 says, keep going. Remember, this is a part of the song to keep climbing. This is a group of people making their way from home to Jerusalem to worship God at the temple, and they're being reminded, keep walking. Don't give up. Don't stop. Don't sit by the wayside. Keep going. Here's what joy is. Joy is a byproduct of abundance. Think about that phrase for a minute. Joy is a byproduct of abundance. This is the key to understanding what we need, and it's a key to understanding why we often search out for substitutes that seem adequate but fail us. Joy is a byproduct of abundance. When we have everything that we need, when we don't lack anything, when we're not worried about where our next meal is going to come from or where our next car payment's going to come from, when we're not worried about lacking things, we can be happy. We can sit back and be thankful and be joyful. Joy is a byproduct of abundance. But the question is what abundance are we seeking? You see, we begin to seek shortcuts. We begin to seek financial abundance, or we begin to seek the abundance of pleasure. We begin to seek the abundance of things, or the abundance of happiness, happy circumstances, happy moments, happy experiences, and yet these fall flat. Entertainment feels like happiness. Distraction has all of the allurement of peace. And excess looks like abundance, but when things get bad, they dissolve because they're smoke and mirrors. Those things are moments. They're great when it's going on. And see, that's the thing. They are great when it's going on. We're happy when we're happy. But the problem is if that's all you seek to satisfy yourself with, when the going gets tough, those things disappear. Those things dissolve. Those things go away. There is no substance to them. Instead, we have this to look forward to. Bounty. What's the slogan for bounty? It's the quicker, picker, upper. What does that mean? Well, I know what it means in a advertising sense for paper towels, but here's what I thought about. Bounty is another word for abundance. Abundance. In God, we have an abundance that is the ultimate quicker, picker, upper for the Christian. It doesn't preclude loss or grief. You wouldn't need paper towels if you never made a what? A mess. See, paper towels are there to help us when things get difficult. They're there to pick up the mess. God's there to pick us up. Joy doesn't preclude loss or grief. It doesn't deny times of sorrow and letdown. What joy does is look to the past and know God has taken care of us. He has taken care of us. And then it is looking to the future, and it rests assured that God will bring us out of this shadow of death that we're walking in right now. Yea, though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death. Even though we may be in the midst of a difficult time, even though we may be in the midst of sowing and scattering our seeds and working hard and suffering, He is with us, even if He is not removing these burdens as quickly or completely as we would like. This song looks to the past, rests in the future, and in the moment is the quicker, picker, upper. That's what this psalm is calling us to do. Keep going. Yes, I know that it's hard now, but the sun is going to come up. Yes, I know that it's hard now, but if you plant the seeds and do the work now, then when the harvest time comes, you will have something to show for it, because that is something of substance that lasts. If you spend all your time squandering these opportunities and these things, then when you need something that's lasting, you'll find your hands are empty. And so God gives us an opportunity to do better and to have better. This morning, as we sing the invitation song, we give you the opportunity to let us know how we can help you. We sing, create in me a clean heart, O God. Renew a right spirit within me. Cast me not away from your presence, O Lord. Take not your Holy Spirit from me. Restore unto me the joy of my salvation. Restore unto me the joy of my salvation. There's an idea we could talk about for a little bit. If you are not saved this morning, then there is a joy that you cannot enjoy. You are missing the most important piece of the puzzle. If you haven't come to Christ confessing that you need Him to take away your sin, and the only way that you can be saved is through Him, to submit through baptism to death, burial, and resurrection in your own life, then there's a joy that you're missing out on. But maybe you're saved, but you're not joyful. You're saved, but you're not experiencing that abundance. You need to find that again. We're going to sing this invitation song. We're all going to stand together and sing together. And while we're doing that, if you're not where you need to be, if you need help of any kind, then let us know what it is. Let us know what's going on. Even if you don't know what you need to resolve it, let us see how we can help. By coming forward as together we stand and as we